The, the second industrial revolution that took place in the U.S. happened between the years 1870 through 1920. This new era of industrial transformation began with numerous discoveries and inventions that significantly altered manufacturing, transportation, and the everyday lives of Americans. From even before the Civil War, from the beginning, from the colonial era of the Americas, we have always had small local businesses and mom and pop shops. We have never had any big businesses in charge of one thing, such as a major oil corporation. But this changes after the Civil War, when industry and business begin to take over these small businesses. This rise of big business begins the second industrial revolution in America. These new industries included steel, oil, and transportation, which made this all possible. The Bizerment process, which was the method that could produce more steel in one day than other techniques, made the steel industry boom. And Alexander Hawley adapted and improved the Bizerment process from the production of 15,000 tons in 1865 to 28 million tons by 1910, made this industry succeed greatly. As for oil, Edwin L. Drake, noticing the desperate need for an inexpensive fuel source, began to drill for oil. When he succeeded in obtaining this oil, others began to drill for oil as well in hope of this black gold, which they called it. With this, the oil industry was underway. The booming of these two industries led to the advances in transportation, especially for railroads. The mass production of steel led to the layout of thousands of miles of new tracks, linking urban cities with that of remote towns. It also provided fast transportation of goods, people, etc. The airplane and the automobile also revolutionized the transportation industry. This economic growth impacted the national economy by these industries providing thousands of new jobs and lowering the expenses of these productions, causing people to spend and increase the national economy as a whole. The giants of this time, one of the giants of this time was Andrew Carnegie, founder of the Carnegie Steel Company, who was a huge giant in the steel industry. He used vertical integration, which was the buying out of companies that provided the materials and services upon which his enterprises depended on. His real success lay in reducing costs. He cut out the middleman by buying iron and coal mines, which provided raw materials to run his steel mine. He used lots of techniques to lower the price on the products to beat his competitors. His fortune was vast, and he donated $350 million to charity. He realized that by buying supplies in bulk and producing goods in large quantities, he could lower production costs and increase profits. Another giant at this time was John D. Rockefeller, who was a major player in the oil industry. He was the founder of the Standard Oil Company. He used the same method of vertical integration, but to expand his company, he used what is known as horizontal integration, which was one company's control of other companies producing the same product. He forced all his competitors to sell out. Like Carnegie, he also donated to charity almost $550 million. Cornelius Vanderbilt was a giant at this time in the railroad industry. When the Civil War was over, he invested in the railroad industry. He controlled the New York Central Railroad and two lines that connected the Central with New York City. Vanderbilt extended his railroad system by purchasing smaller lines, then combined them to make direct routes between urban cities. He continued to gain control of small lines and eventually controlled more than 4,500 miles of railroad track. His total fortune was estimated to be $100 million. Although the U.S. had started to industrialize, the working conditions and living conditions were horrible. Employers lost limbs, some even died. Low wages and long hours affected everyone. During this time, in 1881 alone, it was reported that 30,000 railroad workers were killed or injured. Living conditions were also horrible. Many companies increased their control over the workers by building company towns where the company owned the workers' housing and the retail businesses they used. Working conditions were unsanitary and terrible. Because of the industrialization of the Americas, urbanization occurred. Urbanization is the process in which an increasing proportion of people begin to live in cities and the suburbs of cities. What causes mass movement of thousands of people? Well, urbanization was a new frontier for people. It had mass transit, forms of public transportation such as electric commuter trains, subways, and trolley cars. Many people liked the idea of cheap transportation in cities. It also provided new economic and social opportunities for people to begin anew. This urbanization also gave life new energy in the city. It gave people hope and the opportunities of finding jobs for they could begin a new life here in America. Urbanization's happening was due to all these factors and caused people to move there for the hope of a better life. But a downside to living in these new metropolitan areas was the unsanitary living condition. People were forced into small, squalid rooms probably already occupied with more than one family. There was no proper sewage system, causing it to be a breeding place for diseases and illnesses and even death. Garbage piled the streets and alleys, causing it to stink. These places were horrible places to live, but they dealt with it to make some kind of money in the end. But as I mentioned before, the positives of these new metropolitan areas was the finding of new jobs and the hope of a better life. Before the Industrial Revolution and the urbanization of megalopolises, people often lived in small towns, being that the tallest buildings there were probably the churches. They also had a division of upper class and lower class people, in which upper class people lived in the cities, while lower class people lived in the country and would go to town only for legal issues or religious affairs. But they always had to go back to the country. But then when urbanization in this time period happened, all of that changed. Megalopolises merged the upper class and lower classes together in one place to interact. Also, society was growing outward due to westward expansion, but also growing upward due to the creation of skyscrapers. Back then they used brick to build their building, but due to industrialization and urbanization, they started to use steel to construct their buildings.